All right, we're back. It is COMP123, summer 2016, week 11, and it's programming 2. We've been talking about data access with Windows Forms, and where last we left off, we had this piece done where we can, if I run this thing now, our project, I can, if I click the details for this one, it'll bring up the window, but nothing comes in. Right, so we have to get the data now. Just to keep everyone on track so that you have what I have, I'm going to go to Team Explorer and I'm going to add in my changes. These are the changes that I made, right, to the list form, and I'll add them in and I'll say added add student functionality. That's what I did so far. And details. What else? Details edit and delete buttons to data grid view. That's what I've done so far. Commit staged, home, and I will push this one only so that way if you're behind, then you can have a a reference to what I've done. You can actually look at my code online if you miss something or if you mistype something. You compare mine with yours. Okay, so here's what I want to do now. So now that I sent the information from my student list, I want to get the information from my details form, right? All right, so where does this information come in? Well, it comes into these properties, right? When this form is instantiated, it gets the value from these properties get filled up with values. And then what I want to do is when the form loads, in this case, right? Not when it's activated, but when the form loads, right? I want to get the details. Let me see if this works here. I want to get the details from the properties and load it onto my form, right? Into my form, my text boxes and everything else. Okay? So the way to do that, of course, is to say something like this. So on form load, and again, I have the form load event already prepared for us, right? And again, how do I get the form load event for this one? If I go back to my student details form, I just double click on the background here, and I get my form load event, right? The load, when the form loads, it triggers the event to fire, and then I can respond to it. So here's the event, my form load event, and I'm going to do something like this. I want to create that student data context again, because I'm going to refer to this thing. So my student data context, we're going to call it DB again. And this is relative to this particular method of this form. So it's not going to clash with anything else. It's equal to a new student data context. So we're going to make a connection to the database again. Here's my connection, right? Once I've done this, I want to say something like this. I want to kind of read the form, right? And the way I can do that, of course, is to declare a new object, right? A new object of student, right? Okay, I'm going to talk about this. So it's going to be student, right? My student object. And we're going to talk about this in a second because I want to make sure you guys are good with this because it's going to be a little bit of a longer one, right? Here's my student, and I'm going to call this. And by the way, a lot of times what you might see instead of using student, you might see the keyword var. Remember we've seen this before? Var means make it dynamic. A dynamic variable, as opposed to knowing which one it is. We're going to use duck typing this way, dynamic typing, to find out what this is. I'm going to say my student details, we're going to call student details object is equal to, remember we said that we're going to use that selection statement? We're going to put it in brackets this time. We're going to say from student, this is the item, right, in db.students, right? So that's the table in the database called students, right? Where student.student ID, remember I said this, is exactly equal to this .student ID, right? I want you to select the student. So select an object. Basically select the student that matches up with the student ID that I have here in this form, that I passed into this form from the other one. Remember we get that student ID when I click on the button? I'm going to pass it in here. And then to finish this off, right, this isn't enough, just to solve some issues, I'm going to say, give me the first one or default, which means if I don't find any, give me back. Don't error out. It'll prevent errors if I say first or default. first or default basically says return the first element or a default value if this element contains nothing. So if I look at the database and it doesn't contain anything somehow, it's not going to error out. It's not going to give me some weird null exception error, right? That's what it does. So now student details, if you look over on it, if I hover over, it's of type student. So if I want to, I can change this var, right? Because it kind of detects what it is. It says, hey, I'm getting some kind of value from this, right? After the equal sign. Here's my variable, but I don't know what kind of data it's going to be. But if I hover over it now, it tells me, Visual Studio says it's of type student. So if I really want to, I could do something like this, student, right? And that's okay. So student details is a student. It has first name, last name, number, right? All those kind of things. It has those things, right? Well, if that's true, then I can display the details, right? So let's display the details. Display details, right? In the text boxes of the form. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to display the details here. And I'm going to do that by, of course, doing the opposite of what I did last time, right? Last time what I did was I said, take the details, the text boxes, and assign them to the values of the database. This one I'm going to do the other way around. I'm going to say first name text box dot text is equal to student details. That's the object that I just created by reading the database, right? Dot first name. Oops, if I can actually type it without making an error. First name. And then my last name text box dot text. You can see where this is going. It's equal to student details, the student object, right? Last name. And then the last one, of course, is student number textbox.text is equal to the student details object that I'm reading from the database, and then number, right? Because that's what it's called in the database. So this displays all the details inside my form. It doesn't do anything yet, right? But this is probably all I want to do, but I'm going to have a problem. Here's the problem. My form is not just being used to get details, and also it's not only being used, my form is not only being used to delete or to edit, it's also being used to add. And when I add something, I want my form to be empty, right? So I want to say this. I don't want to get my student details, right, if my form type is not greater than 3. Remember, that's why I have my form type, details, delete, or edit and delete. I want to check that. So I want to say something like this. Before I do this, just to be safe, I'm going to say if this dot form type is greater than 3. That means it's either, like I said before, if it's going to be a details form, or is it going to be an edit type form or a delete type form. One of those. Then and only then do I want to do this. Copy this one here. So cut. Otherwise, I'm going to fill up the details of my form, and then what I'm going to get is a bit of an error, right? I'm going to get a bit of an error when I try and add a new form. I don't want to kill my add form, right? This is what it looks like. Okay. Now, it's not going to change everything else in the form. I'm going to have to figure that out in a second, right? So let's do this first part first. So let's see if this runs. So run this thing, and then I click my details. I should get my name, everything in there. Yeah? Good. So I've read the database, and now I'm reading everything from the database into the form. These submit buttons, so if I click the submit button right now, woohoo, I'm going to add another one of my Toms into the database. And I can keep doing that over and over again. I can keep adding the same name into the database. I don't want that. Let's click cancel. So first of all, I know that it reads this one. Let's read another one. Let's read, how about this one? What happens there? What about these? Does it error out? And it does. We're going to figure that out. Why? How come it created those extra columns? It says it's a null reference exception because we click the column that doesn't exist. Right, let's continue. Here's another one. If I run this again, right? So let's say stop this and run it again. And we're going to fix this problem in a second, right? If I click Peter Parker, I should get Peter Parker, yeah? There it is. In fact, if I click edit, I should get that too. And if I click delete, I should get that too. because right now all those buttons do the exact same thing. If I click delete on this one, I should just get the form filled up with stuff that I want to delete, right? All right. So that piece works. The piece that reads from the database, which is this piece right here, it's functional now. This reads from the database, this piece. So this, and again, I'll kind of annotate this so you can see it on the video. Create database object. Right, that's what it is. The next one is over here, check to ensure that you are asking for a details form, an edit form, or a delete form. Which form are you looking for? Delete form. Only those am I going to do this, right? Because if I put this check in there, if form type is greater than 3, and if I go press play again, as an example, and if I click add student, right, then I don't want everything to be filled up. I want it to be empty like this, right? The only time I want it to be empty is if I click something else, like this one. Then I want it to fill up with this, right? Okay, cool. So that's the next piece. All right, so first name, last name, student number, okay, everything else is there. Well, I want to be able to change or customize my form, right? I want to customize my form based on, right, what I'm doing, what kind of form I'm using, okay? So that's the next piece I want to do. So one thing is read the form. And the next piece I want to do is say, well, let's switch this thing. So depending on the form type, right? Depending on the form type, so I'm going to say switch. Let's use a switch statement. It's almost like saying if else, if else, if else here, right? So switch the form type. So this dot form type. And depending on which form type it is, if it's details or whatever, we're going to use this now. We're going to say something like this. This is how you can use the details to switch, right? We're going to say case. We're going to convert it to int, right? My column button dot details. This is the one I want right now. Column button dot details. If that's the case, so it's form number 4. The form type is 4, right? If that's the case, then what do I want to do in here, right? I want to do a couple things. One of them is my student label shouldn't say add student anymore. It should say something like student details. So that's just changing the name of the label. So I can say new student label dot text is equal to student details. That's what this does. And you know what else? I also want the text of this form for the actual text that comes up on the actual title bar. The title of this form should also say that too. So this dot text itself should also be equal to student details. Okay. I also want to hide my submit button because I don't want someone to submit another version of the same thing I'm already looking at. I don't want that. That'll be a mistake. So I want to click the submit button, right? Dot visible. I want to make that is equal to false. So I want to hide the submit button. I don't want the submit button to do that, right? I also want to make the form read only, because that doesn't make any sense that I should be able to type anything in there, right? I'm just getting the details. I'm reading it. So I'm going to say my first name text box dot text, dot read only is equal to true. I'm going to do that for the other ones too. I'm going to say my last name text box dot read only. The read only properly is equal to true. So I'm just turning them as read only. And my student number text box dot read only is also equal to true. So I'm making all those read only. You can't do anything with them. All you can do is display what I've got my details in right now. The other thing is I want to change my cancel button. Instead of saying cancel, my cancel button dot text, I want to change my cancel button dot text so it says back. Right? Why? So I can go back to my form. All I'm doing is viewing stuff and going back. Right? So if this all works, if this form switching stuff works, I should be able to go back and only view the stuff that I'm looking at, only the delete of the details of each of my objects. And I'm going to add other cases in here. What are the other cases? Here are the other cases, just so that way you're clear. Case, int, column button dot edit. If it's the edit button that I'm clicking, right? Remember, column button is just my enum I made, right? That keeps track of 4, 5, or 6. That's all it's doing, right? Then break, right? And the other one is case int. And if you may have not seen this casting syntax before, but it's the same as saying convert to int32. That's the same way of doing that. If my column button dot delete, that's what it is. If it's the delete button, then do something else. Now, I don't have anything in there right now, but that's what's going in here. So case, if it's the delete button, if the button clicked is the details button, right, then do something else. Over here, to make it clear, if the button clicked is the edit button, then do something else, right? And then if the button clicked is the delete button, then do something else. That's what this is. I'm using a switch statement instead of an if else, if else, if else. That's all I'm doing. Same thing. It's a little cleaner, right? And you could also think about this. I could also take this text out of here and make it into its own method, just to refactor it to make it even nicer, right? But for now, let's leave it as is because we're going to do some copy pasting in here. Let's see if this works. The first thing is when we make a change like this, see if it works. And if it ever works, I'm going to put it up to GitHub to say added details. The details form is almost done, right? Let's check this out and see if it works. Details. So now I have a couple things. I have a back button. It says student details instead of add student, right? Using the same form, right? I can't type anything in there, right? It's all protected. And if I click back, I go back to here. So I have a details form. It's beautiful, right? Form works. So I'm using the same form. And instead of using 3 forms or 4 forms, I'm using 1, right? All right, now we got to fix the edit and the delete. Edit is a little bit more challenging because edit actually does something in the database. You have to connect to the database again, yeah. So this reads everything, right? But my submit button is where everything happens, right? So when I click the submit button, when it's the edit form, it does something different than when it's the add form, right? Still the same submit button, right? But it's going to be something else. Well, first of all, let's change some of the things. This thing here, let's finish this part. This is going to change the way the form looks when we click these buttons, right? So let's try this out. So the first one is my new student label, right? My new student label dot text for the edit, right, is going to be equal to edit student, right? That's going to be the difference. And then this dot text, the actual label of the title bar, is going to also be equal to edit student, right? And then the next piece is my submit button isn't going to say submit. My submit button dot text, right? I'm going to make it say update, right? Furthermore, let's do the same changes for the delete button, right? So my delete form. So my new student label dot text is going to say delete student, right? So it makes sense. Delete student. And then this dot text, so the actual title bar is going to say the same thing, delete student. And then my first name text box dot text, it's going to be it's going to be the same. Instead of doing this, typing it again, I'm just going to take these values up here. They're going to be read only again, right? I don't want to edit the stuff I'm deleting. So just put this all over here, right? So copy these 3 ones and put them in here. These 3 lines. There we go. And the other thing I want to change is my submit button. My submit button text is going to equal to delete. So it makes sense. Now let's check this form out. Now all I'm doing is changing the way the form looks. It's going to have the same functionality in the background. We have to fix that. So details, edit, says edit student, right, with an update. Delete, and then it says, first name, blah, 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 blah. I could probably change this to a red button too if I wanted to, just to make it really dramatic, right? Make it red. How do I make the delete button red? It's not that's not that difficult, right? Let me fix that. So the delete button not only is going to say delete, but my submit button, that's what it is. My submit button dot back color, right, is going to be equal to color dot red. Just to make it so it's really dramatic. So you know that if you're doing something, if you delete this, it's gone from the database, right? Let's run this thing again. So if I click my delete button now, my delete button's red, right? Make sense? And I have my cancel button all the time. So my details, I only have one button in the middle, it says back. My edit button, it only has my cancel and update. I can do something in there if I want to cancel and update. And then my delete button, everything is read-only again, but it has a red button. It's the same buttons. All I'm doing is just changing the way they look, right? Questions so far? So again, all I'm doing is I'm depending on which form it is, which button I'm clicking, it's generating the stuff on the other form. It's passing information from one form to the other that I want you to really understand here right now. Yeah.
I mean, these buttons are basically the part of the not data grid. It's a part of the form.
These buttons that I'm getting from my student list, these ones here, right? These buttons here are actually being generated inside of each row of my form, right? That's what they are. So each of these form rows is generating these buttons, right? When I read the data table, it's really what it's doing is creating a for each loop. So for each of the rows inside the table, it's going to generate a row on the data grid. That's what it's doing, right? What I'm telling it is, don't make only data-bound controls. I got 3 data-bound columns that I'm showing, but I also want 3 columns that are not data-bound, right? These 3 columns that are not data-bound are going to show these little buttons, and depending on which column and which cell I'm clicking, I'm going to create the form on the other end. That's what I'm doing, because there is no button. There is no button click event for these ones. It'd be nice. It would be really nice if I could make button click events for each one of these. Not so in this particular case in Windows Forms, right? All right, let's update that to GitHub. So I'm going to kind of go to GitHub. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes, and I'm going to say my student details form changed. I'm going to say added styling for different form types. All done, right? Well, okay, let me ask you this. If I didn't have the form type, I could create several different forms, right? I can create one form per button that I'm clicking, right? So one option is, this is the thing, and I like your question, right? But it's like this. I could have created one button for an add student, another form, and one form for add student, one form for details, one form for edit, one form for delete. One form, one form, one form, one form. But instead, I'm using one form for all of those things. I have one form, not one each. I'm having one total form for all those functions, not individual forms. This way I'd have to create different forms. A different form for add student, a different form for delete, a different form for edit, a different form for details or whatever. And then you'd have like a total of 5 forms, right? Or 4 forms, right? I wouldn't want that, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forms. I can do it in 2, right? It's more efficient this way. I'm using 2 forms to do the work of 5 forms, right? That's why I'm doing it this way. And the form type is just a variable that I'm using to tell the receiving form, my details form, which one I want. What do I want that details form to look like? Do I want it to look like a details form, an add form? What do I want it to look like? Because it has the same buttons. In fact, we'd be duplicating over and over again. My form, my student details form, if I made the other forms, it would be the exact same form with a different name. That makes no sense. That's like, whenever I see duplication, I'm always thinking like, I need a class for that. I need to rework that. I need to refactor that to make it slim, to make it skinnier. This is too fat if I had too many of these different forms, right? I want to make one form. The grid itself, this grid here, when I click on this button, it's just a cell inside of the data grid, column row. I'm clicking on that cell. When I click on the cell, I detect which cell I'm clicking on, and then that's going to generate the form type that's going to pass on to the other side, right? Yes. That's good. So that's a good question. So student ID would be for my student list, right? So my student list form, this one, right? Line 57. So what's happening here is this. It says, here's my student grid view. The student grid view is the grid view, this thing here. This grid view takes all the fields from the database. It has a hidden student ID field, first name, last name, number, and so on, right? So that's what it has. So if I go here, what I'm doing is I'm saying, look at the student grid view, take a look at the row that I'm clicking on, right? And then look at that cell that has the name of student ID attached to it. I'm using a dictionary way of accessing the array, right? And then get the value from that cell and pass it into the student ID. But the value is actually determined to be an object. And all I'm doing is I'm converting it to an int object, so that I can store it in the student ID. That's why I'm doing that, right? So that's why I'm getting the value of the cell that I'm clicking on, and then I'm reading the student ID related to that cell, right? On that row, I'm cross-referencing, right? Saying row, column, that cell there. What's the student ID for that one? Oh, it's this one. Okay, pass that to the form. That's all I'm doing. Okay. All right. So I've got some functionality, but I need to get that other two pieces done. I'm not sure if I can get them both done today because of all the stuff we have to do. But let's talk about the other pieces that I need, and then we'll talk about finishing touches next week, right, for this one. So again, my student list form is one part, but the other part that I need to take care of is my submit button. My submit button is going to change according to what type of form it is, right? So if I go back to my student details form, here it is, right? And I have my cancel button. Here's my submit button for the add. This one here adds a new student. I don't want to add a new student here. I want to, let's do the edit piece, the edit, right? I want to edit my student, all right? Well, I got to check to see what's happening here. Well, here's what I want to do. If my student, if it's a new form, I want to pull the database if it's a new form, right? So I want to do something like this. So check to see, check if the form type is details, edit, or delete. That's what I want to check. We did that before. We say something like this. If, form type, right? So this dot form type. And I'm doing this for a reason. This dot form type, right? Am I in the right place? Details form. Yeah. If this dot form type is greater than 3, that means that it's either a details form, an edit form, or a delete form. If that's true, then I want to read the database only for those types. I want to do something with the database, right? So I'm going to create a different connection just for those types. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this new student. I've created an object, but I'm going to reference the student a little differently. I'm going to say new student then, when it's that kind of form, edit, details, edit, or delete, right? Actually, it's really only for edit or delete, right? I want to create a new student, right? And inside my, I'm sorry, let me go back. I'm duplicating. I want to do from the data. I want to pull from the database. So from student and db.students. So I'm going to look at the database, take a look at the students table in the database, and then what I want to say is where my student, right? Again, dot student ID, right, is exactly equal to this dot student ID, right? Select my student again. I want to do the same thing again I did earlier, and I want to do first or default, this one. Okay, so I'm getting this student that's from the database. Okay, and then I'm filling it up with data, right, from the stuff that I'm getting, just like I did before, right? Okay. And here's what I'm going to do. I can't always do this. I can't always insert. Right now, my submit button always inserts, right? I got to check to see if the form type is less than 3 or less than 4, if it's an add, right? So if it's an add, I'm trying to do an add, then I want to check to see if it's that. So check if form type is, add student, if that's the type. And I know how I can figure that out, because I can say if this dot form type is less than 4, because remember I go 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. If it's one of those columns are being clicked and you get me over here somehow, it's an add, chances are. If it's less than 4 or not equal to something greater, right? Then what I want to do is I want to do this. I want to do the add. This does the add to the database piece. This piece. This is adding to the database. Let's only do this when it's an add button that's being clicked, right? Also, I should check if I'm going to delete my student, right? Maybe I can do the delete altogether, right? Let's see if I want to delete my student, it's got to look different. And if I want to update my database, right? If I just want to update my database, it's going to do also what I've already done, right? Which is just DB submit changes. So if I just do DB submit changes, that's all I need to do from my edit. That's it. I just need to do this to update, save changes / update record. This update record does it regardless of. I'm going to leave this space in here because this is where I'm going to put my delete. So if I want to do my delete record, I'm going to put it in there. I don't have my delete in there yet. I'm going to put it in there in a second. But just all I need to do update is just this. Once I submit my changes, I make my changes because I've done this piece, and I'm associating my student object with the database. Once I read in what's in there and I change what's inside of there from my text box, as an example, when I click on my submit button, then it's going to take the values that I got from my text box, put them in there, and if there's anything different that's what's on record inside my database, it's going to update the record. That's all you need to do to update the record. So this is my update. Let's try this out. And then we can do my delete really quickly, and then we've got full CRUD. And then we'll prettify everything next week. Make it all pretty looking, right? So let's run this through. So I want to update Tom. I don't like my last name. It's too long and it's too Greek, right? Let's change it to something else, right? So I'm going to click edit, right? Remember, I'm clicking the edit form now. I'm going to change my last name to Vanguard, right? Actually, that's what it means. Actually, my last name, Tsiliopoulos, actually means Vanguard or Sentry or something like that. All right, so click update. If I click update, everything's good then, Tom Vanguard. All I didn't change anything. All I did was save changes, right? So that's the update. So my update works. So I've got create, read, and update. I need delete now, and I'm done full CRUD on my database. Let's try this. Let's fix this up before we go, right? So here's my delete record. How do I delete my record? Well, this is where another little thing comes into play, right? So we'll check this out. I can say something like this. If this dot form type, just to make it even clearer, is equal to column button dot delete, right? Or I could say number 4, but maybe that's going to be different later, right? Column button dot delete. If that's the form type, right? Then what do I want to do? I want to do something different, right? I want to confirm, first of all, confirm if the user wants to delete, right? We don't want to delete right away. Wants to delete the record. Because what if he deletes it, like just press the button, gone, right? Oh, I made a mistake. So always confirm if the user wants to delete the record. Number 1. And how do we do that? We make a dialog box. Remember that little message box? So we go like this, dialog result. This is from stuff to see, and I call it result, is equal to a new message box. This is my new message box. And my message box.show, right, is going to include this. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to delete? Right? And then the title of the thing is confirm deletion, right? We're going to talk about message box a little bit more later, right? And then I want two message box buttons. Message box buttons are going to be OK cancel. So I want to show OK cancel on my message box. So if the result is positive, if it's OK, right, then I'll go ahead and delete. So let's do that. So I'm going to say if result, right, is equal to dialog result dot OK, that's what it is, then I want to say db, here's the db command. This is the actual delete command. Get table, like we've seen before, right, of type student, and then do a delete on submit. And then what do I want to delete? Which one? The new student record that I want to delete. New student. This one, the one I just made, the one I'm reading right now. That's it. That's a delete. That's a delete record. Okay, let's test it out and see if it all works, if I'm not wrong, right? And we'll prettify it, like I said, next week. So I'm going to run this thing now, and let's delete the last record. Oh, man. Peter Parker is going to go, right? So this one, don't worry about these ones right now. But if I click on this one, this delete, right, then it's going to bring me to the delete Peter Parker. If I click onto it, we should get a box that says, are you sure? Are you sure you want to delete? Yes, I do. Press OK. If I press OK, Peter Parker is gone, right? From the database. Let's go back again. Delete. I'm going to delete your record now too, right? If I press cancel though, right? No deletion happened, right? If I press edit, right? Right? Just saying, right? It becomes Hassan the man, right? There we go, right? I can do that. But if I don't like it and if I want to delete it, notice how, by the way, it changed my layout. This is bad. This is why I talked about I got to prettify my layout. So it doesn't do that. It doesn't change the size of my layout. It's fixed. Because right now it's not fixed, right? If I click delete, and if I press delete and I press OK, it'll delete you. For now, we'll keep him because I like you so much, right? Maybe what I want to do is I want to edit it, right, and change this back to just what it was before. I can do that, and my update works again, right? No problem. So we've got full CRUD. And we've been doing it. Just to recap, let me go into Team Explorer before I forget, right? I'm going to go to Home, Changes, and I'm going to add it, Added, Edit, and Delete functionality. Okay? So I'm going to commit stage, Home, and I'm going to go to Sync and Push. So now you have everything, all the code, right? That's what I want. I want you to have all the code there. So if you ever need to do this on an exam, you got everything you need. Like I'm not going to test you on, you're going to have everything that you need to do your stuff. So it's all open book, right? And I'm giving you where all the code is, like lesson 11 will be all the code where you need to do this stuff. It's just you putting things together to make it all work. That's the challenge, right? And practicing. So here's what we've done so far today, right? We've modified our details form to add in a few buttons. And we have a few stuff we have to fix up here, like I said. We've got our student list form, right? This one here, that we're using to do 4 different functions. Our add, right? Which is a create. A read, which is a details. An update, which is an edit. And then the delete. So 4 different functions. Our full CRUD is being done right there for each of our objects, right? And we're doing that by sending information into that form, right? We're sending different information from one form to the other. We're passing it a different way, as opposed to the way we did it before, by having individual objects, right? And we're using a SQL, our link to SQL bridge, in order to get our database connection, our context, that creates in the background a student model that we can access. That's what we've done in order for me to do those kinds of functions with link, right? Yes. What's your question? Well, it's not the same thing. It's just using link to access the database and to do different things, right? So all I'm doing is if I'm reading, I'm just I'm just querying the database with link. So from student in student db.students. DB is a database. Look at the students table. So query, give me that student. That's all the students in the table. Okay, now where I'm filtering, where the student is equal to, I don't know, the student ID, one student, right? Select that student and then return one or default, right? And when I return one or default, that student variable now holds the data for that one student. That's what I'm doing when I'm reading, right? If I'm reading the whole database, and like I did with my form, right? The list, I can say, here's my query from student in db.students, right? Select student, no filtering. I want everything, right? That's like a select star, right? So give me everything in the database. That's the next piece. And if I want to delete, I still read the database. Or if I want to insert or delete, what I'm doing with the insert or deleting is there's two parts. Insert on submit. That's the one thing I'm doing by looking at the database. So DB, get table, whatever the table is, the student table. And then insert on submit, my student that I got. Or if I'm deleting, DB, get the table, that's the student table. And then delete on submit, my student that I just made, this one. Those are the two functions, really. That's it. And so once you know how to do those things, and we're going to use this over and over again, the same idea. Next week, we're doing entity framework, so it's going to be slightly different and much easier for us. When we look at it, we're going to go, wow, this is so much easier than doing what we just did, right? Because it'll make more sense. It's more contextual than this. Any other questions? All right. Guys, thanks so much. See you Tuesday. Remember, Monday is a holiday. I already did GitHub.